starting on a high here. This is fantastic. Okay, welcome back to the welcome back to the No Boring Stories podcast. I, of course, am Alex Street, and I am joined today by the fantastic, the wonderful, the magical Dr. Matthew Zanis. How are you, Matt?
I am great. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, we are laughing already because here's the thing. We were deep into a conversation just before this, and I was like, we got to hit record right now, and we got to get this on record because so we're both wearing backwards hat, and I was like, it's like we're in a boy band, and then we're like talking about which boy band did we like, and I admit something that I thought was like outlandish, absurd, that I went to my winter formal with my date who accepted this proposal that I was going to dress up like AJ from the Backstreet Boys. So I drew a mustache and beard on my face and like open shirt and was waiting for my Backstreet Boys song. And you said that you also had an experience of dressing up sort of like a boy band.
It wasn't all that too long ago, actually. We put things into perspective, which is kind of weird, but not really if you know me all that well. My last year at PT school at Duke, I was in a class of 67ers. I was only one of 7 guys, and we had actually choreographed NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, and we all got up on stage and did it at like our final like get together formal party at a bar. In North Carolina.
It's in public. It's not just even the class.
Oh, no,
it's like anybody can see this.
I mean, there were a solid hundreds of people there.
And how many years? So last year of PT school, how many years ago was that?
Yeah, that would have been about 11 years ago now.
My goodness. Okay. So I have the excuse of, I'm a teenager. My brain isn't even fully developed yet. Everything I'm doing is to impress this girl. So of course I'm going to dress up like her favorite Backstreet Boy. You are like, what can I do to bring back the 90s? Was that it? I don't know.
Yeah, and the ironic part is that we were all achieving doctorates at this point too, which is even better. Oh man.
Well, that's it. It's actually, maybe that was it. You had just been deep into your books for so many years that you're like, what year is it? Is anything so popular?
I needed to like let out my inner JT is what had to happen there.
That's it.
I had to let it fly like a peacock.
Had he brought Sexy back yet? I wonder.
Yes, he had definitely brought Sexy back, but I brought it back even further and took it to a new level. Exactly
I brought it back to the future again from the yes, absolutely. This is fantastic. This is something in all the conversations we've had, we've never gone here. And I just thought, well, if somebody really wants to know you, they need to know this about you.
This is how we do it. And you want to know the funny part about that? You had to draw on the mustache beard thing to look like AJ. I am 33 years old and I still need to draw on facial hair.
Hey, no judgment. All judgment is reserved on the facial hair front from this podcast host.
Still waiting to hit puberty, Alex. We'll get there.
You'll get there. Well, with your long locks, at least with the long hair, you're showing up today, which you didn't have 11 years ago. But this is how I know you. You are. We've known each other for what, a year and a half, something like that, through a mastermind.
We're 2 now at this point.
And when we connected, it was. Fast friendship, great conversations. And I was just fascinated by, you had this like bigger vision than what you were doing, it seemed. And I am always attracted to anybody that's sitting in that energy of like, I know where I am, but I also know what I can be or what I can do, ultimately the impact I can make. And that's where I think our conversations started off so strong, because I was like, great, tell me more. And you were like, well, it's this, and this, which we're going to get into here. Why don't you start here by telling us what it is that you do now and the impact that you're seeing now, and then we'll jump back and see kind of how you got here.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting, going back to our origin story, Alex, is that I ended up reaching out to you because I had an intuitive ping that we needed to work together, and that intuitive ping came in the form of a dream. So I can honestly say that I've dreamt about you, Mr. Alex Street. Came down like an angel into my head. Yes. And it was clear as day. Right?
I don't know that I knew that.
You did it?
I knew it was
Oh,
like
wow.
intuition. I don't know what this is. I got to
Yeah.
do. I didn't know that I showed up
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
your
I had
night
a vision.
times.
I'm just
Wow.
sad I didn't put it on my actual vision board because I feel like I'd have to have a picture of you as AJ from NSYNC on my vision board. Um,
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, hey, look, for anyone listening, if you have also dreamt about me, I mean, feel free to let me know. That's always a nice thing to know. And maybe that means that, hey, yeah, we need to take this to the next level. We need to work together. Let's do something. Okay. So what happens after that?
After that, we finally schedule a call and get to know each other a little
Mhm.
more. I think that's where you eventually got to learn about my eccentric personality. I always joke that I'm like 33 going on 13, but it is, very real and authentic to who I am, just very playful in
Yeah.
nature. And I guess, for people to understand exactly who I am and what I do, I am a doctor of physical therapy and a movement expert out of Phoenix, Arizona. But that story of how I got to where I am kind of here today is really one of self-discovery.
Okay.
And
Well,
that,
okay. So
yeah.
we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't worry.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
lead you through
All
that.
right.
But I
All right.
just want to know where you are right now. A movement coach.
Mhm.
Explain that again. Just tell me a little bit more about exactly like how you're showing up right now.
Yeah. So my
Hmm.
superpower, like Thor, because I do get mistaken for Thor on occasion,
Yes.
is really pattern recognition. So my brain works in puzzles, and it likes to discover and put together patterns that help me fit pieces of a puzzle together for somebody's what I call movement literacy, right? To
Ah.
help them fill in the gaps of their movement literacy and help them become more competent and confident in their movement.
So if I have tight hamstrings
Mhm.
and like would that be it? You're like, okay, great. There's a symptom that we can work on, but you already know where that begins or something, or you can at
Yeah,
least
well,
have
how
a
many
good
people
guess.
you know that have tight hamstrings, Alex?
So many. We talk about
Probably
it
like
all the time. Me and my
everybody,
friends, this is all that we of course, sure.
right? I don't know if you have as tight of hamstrings as you think you do. I've seen some videos of you upside down twerking on a wall before, so
Said we
I
wouldn't talk about
I
that.
may or may not have instigated that. I feel like we need to bring that back, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so the tight symptom of tight hamstrings that you're feeling, it's really just a sensation, right? It's just information. It is a sensation that gives us clues as into how you're moving your body throughout the day. So my job comes in try and figure out the source of the problem because the source of tight hamstrings can come from a variety of different avenues.
Like,
Oh,
I
okay. So
want you to teach just a little bit here.
a
I
little
mean,
bit.
we don't need
All
to go way down deep, but I just want to see how your brain ultimately
right.
really, because you said you're a movement coach, but you love puzzles. And I just
Yeah.
want to help understand. I want to help those listening even understand what does that look like to see you go to work? So if it's
Mhm.
tight hamstrings, you're like, that's something that's connected to something else
Yeah.
that could be what?
Yeah. So you can go down the neurological pathway, right? You got some big nerves that come out of your back and run down the back of your thigh. And you could have what we call neural tension, neural tightness. So your sciatic nerve, people have heard of
Mhm, mhm.
sciatica all the
Yep.
time. And that's an interesting one to kind of tweeze out because nerves are like vampires, Alex. They love blood flow, but they don't have their own blood supply. So
Ah,
when you actually sit around all day, like most people do at a desk, I'm not saying you do, not
of
trying to
course
call
not.
you out.
I do
But
my
a lot,
dancing reels. I get up for
I
30
see it,
seconds a
man.
day.
I
Yeah.
see it, and I love it too. Yeah, I got to break out some of mine as well. But when you sit in like one position all day long, or if you move in a certain pattern solely, like that's the only pattern that you move your body through throughout the day,
Uh-huh.
what ends up happening is those nerves become very what we call ischemic in nature, which is like a lack of blood flow, lack of oxygen. So that when you bend over and try and straighten your knee and touch your toes, you're essentially trying to stretch out those nerves, and those nerves are like, we can't go here, we can't go here, and they become more ischemic. They lack more oxygen, they lack more blood flow, and then they send a signal to your brain to say, "Hey, something is wrong here." Okay,
Mm.
so that's one thing that we can tweeze out. Okay, but the interesting part about the hamstring is that a lot of people go to like a muscle length issue where
Right.
the muscle itself is short. And this is where it's a common misnomer because the hamstring is a two joint muscle, right? So it crosses the knee, crosses the hip. It's never really going to be physiologically short because you're always moving your knee, always moving your hip. So you're constantly changing length at either one of those ends, like the origin
Right.
and the insertion of that muscle. So what it really comes down to is your hip and your pelvis moving as well as it can, and is your knee moving as well as it can, right? And that once
Mm,
again comes down to those sustained patterns that we put ourselves into all the time. And people blame all their low back pain on stiff hamstrings, but it's really never the case. It's just a lack of movement variety, right? We always say that variety is the spice of life, and I always talk about the fact that the healthiest people are the ones that have, that eat the widest variety of food. The
mhm.
same comes down to nutrition, or sorry, with nutrition comes down to movement as well. The people that move in the most variety of ways tend to have the least amount of issues and the least amount of pain experiences as well.
So, okay, so I think we just got a glimpse out of there. This is brilliant because yeah, right? So somebody's like, doctor, my hamstrings are tight. And you're like, great. He's like, I've been stretching. And you're like, so it could be something else. And so you're putting this puzzle together. When somebody says something, they show up and it starts with a problem of some kind,
Mhm.
I assume. Even if that problem is I want to get more fit, they're like, well, I'm not there enough, whatever. So you get to then say, great, this is what you're showing up with, but piece, 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 put it all together and you see, oh, here's what the image actually looks like.
Right. And
Now
I
we go
just
forward
alluded
from there.
and I just alluded to the physical image too, but there's also the mentally, emotional, psychological, spiritual image as well,
Uh-huh.
based off of your past experience, your cultural upbringing, the sports that you played, the way that you view and experience pain, your belief systems around it. That all has a role to play in how you experience and feel the sensations in your body on a daily basis. So we
And
always have
and
to
you
tweak
see all of that.
all of that, right? And that comes down to what we're doing right now, Alex, is having a conversation,
Hmm.
right? This is why my initial appointments when I see people either virtually or in person are 90 minutes to 2 hours long because we spend the majority of that time really getting to know each other and building a deep level of connection and trust because then you have confidence in me because like we can relate to each other now,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
I know how to work with you. I know how to ask you questions. I know way that you're brain processes the sensations you're feeling in your body and the way that you are moving throughout the day.
So I think it just clicked for me, to be completely honest. I
Mm.
mean, I've gone deep into your business and your story and who you are and helped with messaging and everything. And your business is rooted in movement.
Mhm.
And I think I just realized exactly why,
Light
like
bulb
just
moment?
how deep that is. Yeah, because I was going the other way for you. I was thinking that, like, yes, of course, the mental and all that stuff that will affect how you move. But you're saying, show me how you move, and I'll show you, and I'll shine a light on all these other things that are going on.
Mhm.
Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yes, absolutely, because that's where we then can flip the switch on the model of physical therapy that most people are accustomed to, which is a very dependency based model or even a codependency
Hmm.
based model where it falls on the responsibility of the PT or the provider to fix the problem, right? But
Right.
that's never the case. My purpose is to help empower you to solve your own problems, right?
Yeah.
I don't want you to have to see me all the time. I say, to my clients every single time that I love you guys, but I don't want to see you all that often,
Yeah.
right? Because you are fully capable. And quite honestly, you yourself, Alex, or anybody else is the only one that can actually fix the problem. You have to put in the effort. I'm just there as your guide, right? I'm the one
Mhm.
that's kind of showing you along that path.
It's so good, and it just shows so much in your character that this isn't, a bunch of BS that you're making up to just launch a business, right? This is what
No.
I truly appreciate about you, is that this is such a heart-centered thing, and how you're truly trying to change a whole industry. And again, I think we'll kind of open that up as we now unpack the story a little bit. But you said specifically, if there's something that you can do, it would be to empower me, to empower your client, to empower the person that works with you. Would that be the main thing? Like, when somebody's done working with you, is that how you want them to feel? Or what is it that you want them to feel at the end after
Yeah,
working with you?
I want them to feel like they have confidence in themselves and confidence
Mhm.
in their body to really handle whatever life throws their way. Because, I mean, the way the world is right now is actually highlighting a great example of the chaotic nature that is life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And my job is just to solely give you the tools to handle that chaos.
Mm.
It's one of those things where with the human body, we spend a way too much time kind of diving deep into the rabbit hole of trying to control things, right? We try to
Mhm.
brace, we try to minimize, we try to minimize movement, we try to control air, control the joints, we want to brace the spine, we want to support the arches of the feet with orthotics and big cushiony shoes, when that's really the opposite direction that we can be going, because or that we should be going, because the human body, just like life right now, is very chaotic, right? It's a very complex system. There's a lot of variables interworking like a giant spider web, all the time. And if we try to control the chaos, we're going to find ourselves really lost in that process, never really make any headway, versus this empowerment idea of building confidence and having the tools necessary to work with the chaos, to understand it, to learn from it, and to move on with it. It's, my rooted in movement symbol is the cross section of a tree trunk. Right.
Mm.
And I have that tattooed on my thigh for a very specific reason, because it is so powerful and so pertinent to who I am and what the business represents. And those concentric rings of the tree trunk are extremely powerful because they represent that growth and evolution of human movement, right? And the growth of evolution of who we are as humans. And I take
Yeah.
it down specifically into like the masculinity side of things with some of my male clients. But then those rings are also very chaotic looking in nature. They're
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
symmetrical. And that is purposeful as well, because that is representing the chaos of life. And instead of trying to control it, we can then learn to grow with it and learn from it as we move through.
It's it's so good. It's no wonder that again, you've had a bunch of speaking gigs to show up and to teach this stuff, and the way that your business is growing. Because as I'm listening to you, it's what's captivating about what you're saying here. Not only are you bringing a different spin to this, to personal training and or physical therapy, um, but the way that you're talking about it is actually telling a story. So, I mean, hey, you're on the No Boring Stories podcast. We're going to highlight the story here and what you were just drawing attention to, right? Just by showing an image, just by saying it's like a tree trunk. It's like this. We're in the chaos. Think of what you're in right now. You're sparking. You're sparking this element in our mind that is going, yeah, it is chaos right now. Or you're thinking, yeah, what is the most chaotic thing in my life right now? Okay, am I trying to control that? Wow, I am trying to control that. But what he's talking about is to let go of that control and actually work within the chaos. And if that were to happen, then how would my story shift and shape? Because he's painting a different kind of a future. So just even in that simple description of what you just said was absolutely brilliant in how that shows up in our minds and helps us see what's possible within where we are, simply by, again, what you teach. I think is just such an embracing of what's already here,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's so marvelous. I love it.
Yeah, it's almost like shifting the perspective and the lens that you view a lot of this stuff through. And we started off this conversation with the tight hamstring
Well, we
topic.
started off with Backstreet Boys, but yeah.
Well, we did start off with Backstreet Boys, but we slowly transitioned back into, I guess, the purpose of why we're here. But that Backstreet Boys stuff is way more entertaining for people, I think.
Well,
Um, who wants to hear more stories about my past lives?
we all do.
Of course, of course. But I just had a client in yesterday who sprained her ACL. Right, so she kind of overstretched a ligament in her knee. And as I was taking her through some, quote unquote stability exercises for the foot and the ankle and the knee and the hip on her right side, she was complaining of a lot of calf and hamstring tightness
Mm,
and thought that that was a bad thing. Okay. And that was easy enough just to kind of to shift the viewpoint for her and explain the fact that, hey, you sprained an important restraint in your knee. Your calf and your hamstring are just taking up the slack, girl. Like
mhm.
they're just working like they should have been working before. And that sensation that you're feeling is actually a really freaking good thing. Right.
Mm,
So let's embrace that. And once again, learn to work with it, right? Work within those
yeah.
constraints, because that's what's going to get you better.
So this is where we're going to open up now. Where this idea of working with it, working with the chaos, working with the the restraints, even working within
Mm.
the what you have, that instead of fighting against it. Um, where does that begin for you? Like this idea of confidence, of showing up in that way, that like, hey, what I have is what I've got. Like this is what I'm going to work with instead of trying to be something else. Like go back in your story, open up from, you know, early on, was the confidence there? Where does it start?
Well, believe it or not, Alex, despite what you might see right now, was never a very confident individual whatsoever.
Mm,
I was never confident in my own skin. I was an overweight, chubby kid growing
mm.
up, and I had a younger brother who just got those like natural skinny jeans. Right? He was like 10 years old and had a six pack. I was like, come on, man! Like, really?
That's that's me to my older brother.
Yeah,
I was the six pack. It was like, look at me, baby, and I'm like 80 pounds at
yeah.
18
80
years
pounds
old.
soaking wet and just like little skin on bone. Yeah, I know it.
Absolutely.
Oh man, but I got my yeah. Do you want to have a
Flexing
flex off
everywhere.
right now? I know I'm
Okay.
wearing a sweatshirt, but I can take it off.
I know you'll
Yeah.
rip through it if I ask you to flex.
See, there's the confidence piece.
So,
Yeah.
but that's it. So a lot of people have that. They're like, I didn't feel confident as a kid because even the skinny me, I was too skinny as a kid. You're too big, whatever. So what does that? You're not confident because of what?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what are you afraid of?
Oh, I was
Then?
afraid. I was afraid of a lot of things. But what I came to realize is that this lack of confidence, not just in myself physically, like the way I looked aesthetically, but also in trying to play sports and be athletic, and then even talk to girls. I didn't have that because I was afraid of failure.
Hmm.
Right. I was afraid of disappointment, mainly in disappointing my parents, my dad, and then failing in front of them was just never something that was really rewarded. Right. You didn't
Hmm.
want to, because it kind of meant that, my parents were super successful. They still are. And you didn't want to disappoint that nature of them. I mean, my family was a predominant baseball fan. I mean, my dad was a collegiate left-handed pitcher. My brother was a right-handed pitcher. My grandfather was freaking drafted by the Pirates
Come
back
on.
in like the 60s. Right. So I thought I had a lot of these innate genetic abilities. The only problem is that I was a genetic trash can.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I was a genetic trash can.
What do you mean?
I didn't get those innate gifts. My brother got all those.
And you just got the runoffs.
I was the first child, but I think that was like their practice. Right? They didn't quite understand how to assimilate the best genes from both sides of the family into the marvelous being that you see before you here today. So my brother got all those in the second go around. I was not very good at sports, so to speak. I wasn't really the healthiest looking kid. I had a lot of intellect and a lot of intelligence. I had a very like large hard work ethic, but those innate gifts never came easy to me. I had to work
Mm,
hard for everything, and I would practice more, throw more, run more, and I would just continue to get hurt year after year after year. Which we talk about the confidence piece. What do you think that did to my confidence? And
yeah.
I'm like, shit, I just keep
Well, it's
getting
interesting.
batted down.
This is the thing where I think a lot of people will find themselves in this story is there's
Yeah,
this fear of failing uh, right alongside this desire to to
impress.
succeed, to
Yeah, yeah,
impress, right?
yeah.
So yeah, they're working side by side. It's one and the same, really. Is I don't want to fail. I should impress so that I don't fail. And in all of that, what's happening? You don't have, as you've said, the innate natural ability to succeed. So you're pushing yourself harder and harder and harder to get to a place that actually you're not meant to even get to.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you know what? I'm a firm believer in that the universe kind of plays everything out to our favor.
uh-huh.
Everything's happening for a reason. I truly do trust in that. I definitely do not regret all those kind of hardships that I went through, because it led me down the path of like jacking myself up
Right.
year after year to get into like late high school, and finally realized that I was actually a much better coach and an athlete, and a much better provider than a player. I fell in love with helping others succeed, and that
Wow.
was the passion that started to build the fire within me, that I kind of took into my athletic training degree at the University of Pittsburgh, and then down to my doctorate in Duke, which actually led me out here to Arizona.
So that look at that. You just fast tracked all the way through that. And I just want to highlight what you said. I was
Mhm.
a better provider than a player, a better coach than an athlete. I loved to help others succeed, but it took you, what, 17 years to really get to that point.
Mhm.
I want to, like, what about that? So that's like, what would you call that? Leadership, guidance? Like, what is that strength? How do you show up at you're demonstrating an incredible amount of strength in that role,
Yeah.
in that definition. What would you call that?
Well, it's ironic enough that that leadership and that strength was found in the weight room as well,
Yeah.
where strength is built.
Yeah.
And I think all that confidence and everything, it's part of it. But then there's also this idea that it was very fulfilling for me, right? I
Mm,
finally found something that fueled my fire,
yeah.
that gave me energy. And it wasn't being the guy out there underneath the lights getting all the accolades. It was the guy
Mhm.
that was on the sideline or behind the scenes, making sure that these people are well enough to achieve those accolades. And
So
I found
that's
a
where
lot of comfort in that.
I'm wondering, you talked about your dad was an athlete, your
Mhm.
grandfather was an athlete, and you're like, I didn't get those. I was a genetic garbage can. Um, but there's a different skill set here. This is what's so fascinating. This highlights for you kind of towards the end of high school, and you're like, okay, this. But wow, yeah, I can celebrate others. I can lead people forwards. I can coach you like crazy and find incredible joy in that. Um, do you see that? Let's play the gene pool
Sure.
game. Do you see that in your mom, grandmother, any other people kind of, that might be
Mhm.
attached to that? Do you see that part in there?
You know what? That's a very great question because I never actually thought about that aspect of the genetics before. I always went
Come
down
on.
the physical route. Yeah, I know. And just quickly thinking about it now, my mom was always the one that kind of pushed my brother and I to be successful
Mm,
and to put themselves out there. So there's definitely an essence of her within
yeah.
me of like pushing others to succeed because I can see the potential in them just like she saw the potential in us. And she has a doctor and a lawyer as her sons, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that she did her part. I'm very grateful for that as well. And then on the other side of the coin, there is my dad who was always very supportive, right? He created that structure and that container that allowed us to succeed.
Yeah.
And I think that's also part of this too, because, most of what coaching is, and you do this exceptionally well, because I know from experience, is
Mhm.
you create this container, this structure that allows us to transform
Mhm.
inside of it, right? And I say
Mhm.
this all the time that I'm creating this container that allows for all the physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual transformations to come forth because it is providing like a foundational level full of constraints that allows you to feel safe enough to succeed. Then, right?
Yeah. Mm.
I think that's 100% part of it.
So, and again, I think your story is our story, and what you just drew attention to was I felt like I didn't have this skill, so where was my worth? But when we look at this grandeur of life, and especially who you are now,
Mhm.
those specific athletic skills are such a minute part of who you are and could be and can be as a human participating in this incredible life that we're all a part of. But what you just opened up there was this, like, yeah, but I think I received this ability to see potential in people and to drive people towards a goal, to coach them truly is what you innately learned or took, nature nurture, who knows, but you now act in this way that is showing that as your strength. And honestly, you go, okay, who cares if you can throw a football, because you're helping more people than the quarterback really ever could. It's not a
Yeah.
comparison game, but just to put yourself in that position is um that's a beautiful picture, I think.
And that's always been my goal, Alex, is to have a larger impact, right? There's
Right.
only so much that I could do from an individual basis, which is where I want to take myself and my businesses to have a larger sphere of influence.
Hmm.
And I think we do that by yes, working with the individual at the community level, but then also look at this more globally. in nature, like who can I influence, other PTs, other
Yeah.
coaches, other professionals, owners of organizations, to have an impact on them so they can then have the ripple effect out into their community and their circles and start to spread this information and to help others build the confidence in themselves. And quite honestly, I kind of view myself as like more of like an artist than anything
Mm,
else. And you're kind of right there too, because my medium is just movement, right? That's
right.
how I build this confidence in people, just as much as you help evoke your medium of being
Yep.
storytelling to help
Yep.
bring out the stories in other people to build their
Yep.
confidence as well. And I think it's very well aligned for sure.
And that, yeah, as you say that, I mean, that really is the most beautiful thing. It's when you know what you're, we're all showing up at a potluck. What are you going to bring? Well, bring your best dish. And if you don't know it yet, bring something. Bring whatever you're working on. And there's a lot of people out there that don't know what their best dish is yet.
Mhm.
But I think what you just drew attention there is you're at a place where you know what you're bringing to the party. I know what I'm bringing to the party, and we're here to help others that may not know to see what they're going to bring next time. Right? Like there's this really beautiful pay it forward, paying it on. And it's not about, oh, good, I've made it. It's wherever I'm at right now. I at least am clear and confident enough in what I've got to bring, as you are, that we can, without a shadow of a doubt, make a difference with the person that we're talking to.
Absolutely. And the reason why are going to make a difference is because that altruism that you just spoke of there, I think is really rooted in integrity and authenticity.
Mm.
And I think that's the most integral piece of all of this.
So we keep going down these other paths, and it's just so easy with you. Why are you so good at conversations? Because I want to guide us through. We're only at high school, but there's a big journey
It's
here.
standing.
There's a big movement that
Yeah.
then you lead into a specific focus in physical therapy and thinking that's going to be the path. And I am going to tell a little bit of the story here to guide us
Go for
through,
it.
and then that leads to really cool opportunities working with athletes, and kind of which has led to even cooler opportunities to work with athletes. Just open up a bit of that story right now, and again, this transformation is is still to happen from 17, 18-year-old Matt
Yeah.
realizing, wow, I can help people now. But there's still a shift that needs
Yeah.
to happen from him to who you are now. So just kind of bring us through that journey a little bit.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I did mention that I really do trust in the universe and the way that it takes us through life here. And when I was deciding on where to go to PT school, I had it narrowed down between two choices. I was either going to go to the University of Baylor in Texas, mainly because they're going to pay for my entire education, and I would get out, without any student loan debt, but I had to commit 4 years to the Army afterward as an officer.
Hmm.
But then I had my very last interview that I almost didn't go on, which was to Duke. I vividly remember it. It was like, do I really want to go down here? I'm kind of dead set on Texas and everything like that. Like, I want to shoot guns and exercise and get a PT degree, and that'll all be fun. But I went down to Duke anyway. My parents convinced me. Mom did, and went down there. And she was actually with me on the interview and totally crushed the interview. And then they were taking us on a tour of Duke's campus in Durham, North Carolina. And they took us into Cameron Indoor Stadium, where Duke basketball plays. And
Mhm.
they're like, "Hey, you see those two rows right behind the basketball hoop? Those are your grad student tickets." It's like, excuse me? He goes, yeah, yeah, that's where you're going to sit. It's like, where do I sign? And $300,000 of student debt later, I have my doctorate degree. But it was because I went to Duke that afforded me the opportunity to meet two very important people in my life. One being a PT with the Arizona Cardinals out here in Phoenix, and that's how I ended up out here. I had an internship with them and absolutely fell in love with the area.
Right.
And I didn't really feel like shoveling snow anymore in Pennsylvania, so came out to the sunshine, where I'm now freezing at 56 degrees outside here in my garage,
Okay. All right.
which
We're
is
not going to talk about
ironic.
temperatures here as I'm looking out at piles of snow. So, okay. Uh,
Yeah, and then that second person was another mentor of mine in Atlanta, Georgia. He ended up working for the United States Olympic teams, the summer sports in like the late 80s, 90s. And it was because of meeting him that led me into this career path that I have now of working with our Olympians, specifically our USA shooting team. So it's one of those things where Yeah, you kind of like people ask me all the time, do I regret doing what I did, making decisions that I made? And like, absolutely not, because they led me down this really, really beautiful path.
But at some point, you realized, you recognized through influence, through impact, inspiration, you recognize that the way that we're doing things, because the way that
Mhm.
you were talking about what you do, 30 minutes ago is not how I think most PTs talk about what they do.
Yeah.
So at some point along the way, that you went in, you learned the books, you learned the processes, and at some point that shifted.
Yeah, it's funny. I joke now that I'm like actively unlearning everything I ever learned in PT school.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, welcome to the club. Not
yeah,
PT school, but I mean that's part of the process is unlearning,
right.
relearning,
And
for
yes,
sure.
it afforded me the degree that I have, and once again, I'm super grateful for that. But it was coming out to here in Arizona and working in the insurance-based clinics that really gave me a lot of insight into, oh, this is how it's done. This is going to be my future, and I didn't like it at all.
Mhm.
I was seeing like 3 or 4 people an hour. There was no quality time. I couldn't really get to know people. I mean, I went from you learn like me spending 90 minutes to 2 hours with people that I do now. Prior to that, only spending 15 minutes. And I was like,
Right.
this isn't right. Like it rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And it really kind of sparked that innate rogue individual inside me who goes against the grain and does things his own way. And I was bouncing around from clinic to clinic because I was just fed up with that clinic. And I realized that it wasn't the clinic, it wasn't the people in there, it was the system. Right. And I
Yeah.
didn't agree with the system.
Mhm.
So I didn't have a game plan, Alex. I'm kind of a big risk taker. I just jumped ship after 2 years of working in the insurance based clinics and threw a table in the back of a CrossFit gym here in Arizona and got to work, which was really an interesting shift in trajectory for me because it solved some problems, right? It solved
Mm.
the problem of the time constraint that I had with clients. I could spend as much time as I wanted to with them now and actually give them the quality of care that I thought they deserved. But then I would also be reimbursed for my value as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
I'm not just collecting a copay from an insurance company
Mhm.
that didn't allow that they actually then dictated the plan of care that was put forth and called into action because you did what was going to be reimbursing you the most amount of money, which totally didn't agree with at all
Yeah.
either. But then what most importantly that did for me is it opened up this time. I was going to say continuum there, time
We
space continuum. Um, but it provided me more
Great
time for other
Scott!
opportunities. Yeah. Yeah. Where, I think we both learned this line from our mentor, Mr. Chris Harder, where your network is more valuable than your net worth.
Mm.
And that's so true. So, so true. Because now I wasn't constrained by other people's timetables, right? I can go out and network and meet other people, other individuals, and grow not just my skills as a physical therapist, but then also the network of people that were going to help me fulfill my dream
Mm.
along the way. And
Well, there's an element just before you go
yeah,
on, there's an element in there about being, the fear of breaking out of the system that you're
mhm,
in, that we end up getting into, whatever that is that this is safe, this is known, this is practical and pragmatic, and even if it feels chaotic in there, I for you to break out of that, the fear is no one's going to catch me, nobody's going to listen, nobody's going to care. This thing that
mhm,
I care about, I'm the only one who cares about it this way, and nobody's going to even know what I'm talking about. So there's an element there where as soon as you put that table up and people start to respond
mhm,
positively, it fuels that. What once was a glimmer, a little spark, is now becomes this like at
mhm.
least embers, and then you get this bigger support, bigger support, bigger support, and it's growing.
Yeah, yeah, and those embers really, the kindling really took fire when I got the opportunity to start my work with the Olympic teams,
Mm,
and that was back in right after Rio, so right after 2016. I had an opportunity to go work with the teams in Malta.
yeah,
Right, I know you know this story very very well.
yeah, it's great.
People don't know where Malta is. It is a tiny little 7 mile by 7 mile island just south of Italy, like above the North African coast in the middle of the Mediterranean. So it's literally the size of San Francisco, just to kind of put that into perspective for you. And that was a very interesting time point for me because, I was starting to come into my own as a PT,
Mhm.
and I had my own philosophies, my own ways of doing things. And the more and more that I progressed down that path, the more and more I felt alone
Mhm.
and isolated, like
Yep.
I was on an island, ironically enough, now on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean. And then it was also a time point where I knew that my relationship and my marriage was coming to an end as
Mm.
well. So like all of this was kind of converging along this isolation, this loneliness. It just culminated on literally being on a freaking island in the middle of the water, super tiny island as well. That seemed like isolation and desolation at the time too. But it was a really beautiful place because it was in that moment where I had my table, same table that I threw in the back of that CrossFit gym,
Huh.
set up in the Olympic Village now with 60 other nations. And I had so much freaking energy, dude. Like
Yeah.
I was getting 4 hours of sleep a night, waking up just full of piss and vinegar, ready to rock out for the day, and working with my athletes. And they were absolutely loving it, right? I was able to have the same conversations with them, get to know them, to kind of dive deep into their stories as well, which then built a
Mhm.
lot of that trust. Because at that point, Alex, they didn't know who the hell I was. They didn't really know me or what I was capable of, but they felt connected to me. And not only did they feel connected to me, but the other nations' athletes felt connected to me for whatever reason as well. Like even amongst the language barrier of not even understanding their level of communication. And it was really interesting. For some reason, like the Germans and the Russians thought that I was one of their own. The blonde hair, blue eyes, and they came up and started talking to me in the language. I'm like, no, sprechen Sie Deutsch. Anyway, but I was like baffled by that. Like, what are these? Why are they coming up to me? Like, why am I
Mm.
different? And then I realized that it was that communication, that connection piece, and that pattern recognition that I was using with my athletes that they just resonated with. They felt that energy, right? And it was in that moment too, where it's like I finally felt myself. I
Mm.
finally felt like who I was finally coming to fruition. And then halfway through that trip, my now ex-wife at the time was actually to come out to visit, I guess, to have a little vacation. And as that time got closer and closer, I started becoming more and more depressed
Mm.
again, right?
Mhm.
And my athletes picked up on that. My coaches picked up on that. Everyone around me picked up on that energy, right? And it was in that moment that I knew that something needed to change, right? I finally found who I
Yeah.
was as an individual and where I needed to grow and evolve. And I needed to then, I don't want to say cut off a toxic relationship because there were a lot of valuable lessons learned in that relationship as well. But I just needed to shift the energy,
Yeah.
right? And that was where that trajectory then just kind of launched me into the stratosphere is what I'm doing now, still traveling with the Olympic teams, having the
Yeah.
opportunity to work with my special operations populations and high level military and Navy special warfare, and I'm absolutely loving it.
And okay, you just I love that. You just let's just bring this down one page. Um, and I mean that's it. That is kind
Yeah.
of how the story goes and shifts and turns. And there's so much I want to ask about. Wait. All those things that you just mentioned there. How do you work with them? Who are they? What did it feel like to win
Yeah.
gold with the shooting team in last year? What 20? I
Tokyo.
guess it was the
Yeah.
2020 Olympics in 2021.
Mhm.
Um, and all of that is fascinating and it's who you are. And I think what's beautiful is that I can ask you about that now. I can ask you what it's like to work in these incredibly in-depth, crazy, high stress, chaotic situations. And I would guess that the answer would be it's super cool and it feels great. Like, I feel alive. I don't know. I just feel like
You're
you
alive.
would give better words to it, but it's somewhere along those lines of I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be.
And you know what? I'll add one more word to there. It makes me feel grounded, right? I kind of
Yeah.
feel like of this earth
Yeah. Yeah.
and kind of anchored into um, fulfillment and energy as well. And to be honest with you, too, that was also highlighted in Tokyo. Now that you bring up the Olympics, because that was a very chaotic experience. There were
Uh-huh.
so many moving variables, so many different things going on, like dealing with all the COVID restrictions, having these athletes there in these beautiful venues, yet no spectators, no people there
Yeah.
to watch them. So it's kind of like weird and eerie. And there was a lot of pressure. A lot of them had, their first time Olympics as well.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I realized my role was so much deeper than just the PT movement guy,
Right.
right? Sure, I was helping them with all the physical
Yeah.
stuff, but what I really served for them was this rock, being this rock, this foundation, this groundedness that allowed them to be able to perform at their best, um, to be able to learn to control that chaotic energy that was going on, that was impacting them at the
Yeah.
time.
And that's it, right? So that what you just did there, how you just wrapped up that experience is how you've, I think, told your entire story here. And that's the beauty of the story is you've got this big journey of going from like I was not a confident kid, I did not have the skills, I pushed myself harder and harder, could never get there, was trying to impress. It was it was terrible. It was hard. It was I didn't know where I belonged or where I fit in. Then all of a sudden, sort of there's this shift that happens where I realize, oh, I'm better by pushing other people forwards. If I lean into that, there might be something there. But as you lean into that, you fall into a system where they tell you how to do that. And you're like, there's a better way. There's got to be something different here. And so you explore that, end up in this island alone where everything comes together. It should be total chaos. But in that, you find yourself on this small piece of ground in the middle of the planet
Yep.
and find this connection to yourself and who you are and realize that like hey, I've found something here that when I let go of trying to control the situation, when I work with what's going on, everything is better. And that is what you bring to your work, that is what you bring to your life, who you are. um, I know that that's what you bring to your clients, and that's what you bring with every message and every stage that you have is this ability to. I think that's it. Go from chaos to control, or chaos to confidence,
Yep.
um, and it's because it comes from your story.
That was a
So
beautiful summation, my friend. That was great. You're so good at what you do.
it's so helpful when I just got people who they really. I mean, I truly believe that everybody is just fascinating. Everybody's really quite fascinating, and um, some people have more like the Olympics. Tell me more, but we didn't even go into that. I've had an Olympian on the podcast. We didn't even really talk about her Olympic experience. It's more about what did you feel throughout that, and that's the fascinating part.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I
But
receive the compliment, but I bounce it right back and say,
and
"You are who you are."
100%, Alex, and I totally appreciate you taking the conversation where you do, because nobody ever asks me those types of questions, right?
Mm,
So this has been a breath of fresh air to be able to have this conversation with you and be able to dive deeper into, who I am and kind of the origin story and why it is that I do what I do.
yeah, brilliant. Okay, so for those that whether they have a tight hamstring or they are or they are an elite athlete trying to excel even more, or they want to start a conversation with you about
Yeah.
this, about really understand how everything is rooted in movement, where do they find you?
Oh, a couple different places here. I'm very active on Instagram at Rooted in Movement, and movement is an acronym, so there's no vowels. It's just MVMNT, and that stands for Movement, Vitality, Mindset, Nutrition, and Training. Or you could reach out to me at Matthew at rootedinmovement.com, or check out rootedinmovement.com is my website as well.
Brilliant, fabulous. I just love you. You're an amazing human, and it's just always a joy to chat to you. So thank you for coming on and sharing this space with me and sharing your whole journey and your love of NSYNC.
Likewise, my friend. See, we're more aligned than you originally thought.
That's it. And with that, we say bye, bye, bye.
Beautiful.